I don't know about you guys, but I am pumped up now after listening to that song.
Sound like porn to you a little bit?
It sounds like sadness. My name's Brian Vaughn of the Boob Tube Boys. That's the podcast we are. Sorry, I'm a little thrown off because we are the Boob Tube Boys again.
Yeah, we've been motion picture men for like 6 weeks now.
Yeah, that's Spencer Hendricks talking, and Van Lee's here too.
Oh, sorry.
There he is.
I'm awake after the worst theme song correlating to its show in the history of
like
television.
I think it's perfect.
It's nice and relaxing.
I will touch on the theme song at the end of these episodes or whenever we discuss it, but I don't like it for the show Taxi. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, we're covering the show Taxi. It's from the 1970s and early 1980s. It's a James L. Brooks special. It is considered one of the best sitcoms of all time. It still sort of holds that position. And it birthed the careers of a lot of very well-known character actors and comedians. Before we talk about the show proper, I'd like to talk about my personal experience with the show Taxi. You guys have like none, right?
None at all?
None at all. I think what happened when I was a kid is that theme song started and I thought, this is not a show I want anything to do with. Very much like MASH. And I do think, and this is a bit of a spoiler, that had I sat through the theme song, I probably would have liked Taxi at least a little, because I did like some of those old shows, not quite to the degree you do, Brian, which you're about to get into, but overall, not an ounce of Taxi.
Well, revisiting some of these shows for Boob Tube Boys has been really enlightening for me, in that I really, really took to Taxi for whatever the reason when it started airing on Nick at Night when I was 9. And this is not a show that really would appeal to a 9-year-old child.
No, not really.
In really any way. But some of the themes of it really still permeate my interests in stories now, like ragtag bunch of weirdos that hang out and kind of have to depend on one another, have dreams they can't quite fulfill, and there's always someone up above trying to thwart them. Sometimes it's Danny DeVito.
Up above.
Up above. Spoiler for Danny DeVito, he's the best, I think.
And he's also not up above often.
No.
Usually he's down below.
That's why I couldn't resist when you mentioned up above Danny DeVito. It's like, in what way?
How did that happen?
Well, he's in that little area,
That's
know?
true.
With that other guy who doesn't really do anything.
His power cage with Jeff? Yeah, it rules in there.
Jeff just kind of is there.
Jeff is Louie's hype man, basically.
Okay.
And he needs that.
He also needs a height man.
Oh, shit.
I do agree what are we calling it? The power cage?
Yeah, that's what I think of it as.
Because that does really elevate him physically. He's not afraid to come out of there, though. He comes down to talk shit if he needs to.
But he will run right back to it if something goes awry. I watched the show, probably most of the series as a kid, as it aired in syndication on Nick at Night, and I really grew to love the characters. That's another thing, I guess, that has permeated my taste, is that I really enjoy character-based media. And in Taxi, as we'll see, a lot of times entire episodes will essentially just focus on a character and not a lot will happen, but they'll let the character kind of breathe and have something to do. And it's an approach that I really like, and I don't think shows do it often now because they'll just be canceled. If you try to do anything that's character-centric and not zany 100% of the time. And Taxi blended comedy and drama in a way that would become a lot more popular later. But like the Mary Tyler Moore Show at the time, really wasn't done a ton.
Well, they said Airplane, the movie Airplane came out in the 80s, was, laugh a minute, the jokes were bang, 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 and agreed, it was a funny movie, the jokes were bang, bang, bang. But the problem I have with it is a lot of then studios thought, we need to do that, but then they didn't have good jokes. That's the difference.
And to be able to fill a 90-minute movie like they did with Airplane with a bunch of good zingers is hard.
That sounds really hard. I don't want to do that.
And I think at the time it was just commonplace, like, well, if it is a joke, just put it in. It doesn't have to be good.
And that's kind of what the sitcom thing happened, is like you said they don't let them breathe and character studies happen anymore. It's now just, let's make joke. Who cares if they're any good? We just have to do that.
Yeah, and in Taxi, for instance, we'll get some moments we'll talk about where the actors, because they do have time, physically even add to their character as scenes develop by just doing little things. It's just, I really enjoyed watching it. I also really enjoy, I've noticed in my revisiting of 70s movies, grimy New York.
It is dirty.
It is so gross. They don't try to make it not gross, and they don't try to make everybody look hot all the time.
I don't know what it is about that New York sort of perception, but it's always appealed to me too. And that's part of why I've always been drawn to New York. For some reason, the way they present it that way just feels so real in a way that I respect, even though it does have some seedier elements and probably is dangerous. When I see it, I'm just kind of like, I want to be there.
Yeah, it makes you feel alive. Well, Taxi, as I mentioned, ran from the late 70s to early 80s, 5 seasons, mostly on ABC, finished up on NBC.
It sounds like a lot of shows of that time period, just getting tossed back and forth from the power networks.
Was this show successful?
Yeah. Not as much as the Mary Tyler Moore Show, I don't believe, but critically it was. It was a big powerhouse.
Interesting then that it shifted channels.
Only for the final season, too. And it could have been a contractual thing.
Sometimes the networks, they feel like they've had that show at the prime time and they want to dump it off, before it goes downhill.
And that happens occasionally now, but I feel like it doesn't happen as much as it used to. Like, I think the last I can remember is that stupid Tim Allen show. Last Man Standing, it switched studios a couple times.
And you wouldn't think it would happen with a big powerhouse show ever now.
Like Last Man Standing.
And like you pointed out just a little bit ago, like a lot of times rather than switching networks now, it'll just not do anymore.
Yeah.
Just like, let's just not make that show.
It just can't get picked up again. The people that created Taxi were pretty much all involved with the Mary Tyler Moore Show. James L. Brooks, Stan Daniels, David Davis, and of course, E.D. Weinberger, whose name I just always remember seeing in 70s credits as a kid.
E.B. Weinberger?
E.D.
Well, so erectile dysfunction Weinberger.
Yeah. Or as when I was a kid, I'm not kidding, I very first thought, why is this Ed guy capitalizing both letters of his first name?
But more importantly than that, I think the dumber name of the names you said is David Davis?
Yeah, because that's Dave Davis. Do you know how fucking cool you'd have to be to carry that name?
And successfully, yeah.
There was a claims adjuster at the insurance company I worked at named Dave Davis.
That's stupid.
Did he carry the name?
Nah, he was a super positive, cheerful old man. But no, you can't help but root for Dave Davis. But no, I wouldn't say it was like, that's a cool guy.
That's a deal where you have to grow into Dave Davis.
He probably had. He's old.
How can you as an adult, and you've gone this 9-month journey to have this baby, and your last name is Davis, and you go, David, that will work. Come on.
I don't think people really put much thought into names until pretty recently.
No.
They were just like, oh, we'll call him Joe. We have 5 Joes. Yeah, it's just Joe.
For instance, I was essentially named when I was born by my brother because my parents just couldn't figure it out. And I was the first one they had together.
You'd sit around and talk that out, you would think.
Well, famously, and by famously, I mean you guys know about this, because nothing that happens on here is famous. I was going to be named Barry.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, one of the alternate names.
Someone talked someone out of that, and that's for the best.
Derek was my alternate name, I think. And I could have been, if I was a girl, it was going to be Miranda.
Oh.
We could be doing the Boob Tube Boys and Girl with Miranda.
Miranda and Van.
And Van, you already have alternate names.
Yeah, I don't need the same one I used to have.
Yeah.
When I was born, though, apparently my mother used to claim that I was named after the booze. The birth name is Evan, of course, so Evan Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But also there was something I recall from your childhood where she was also trying to claim you were named after some guy she knew named Tom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a whole thing. I don't remember the details of it, but supposedly his name was Tom, but someone called him Evan once, not even as a nickname. It just happened one time.
Really stuck with her, though.
And then she's like, that guy's Evan, and I like that name, and it's a stupid name. I don't like Evan at all. Hence, Van.
Hence why you don't go by it. The cast of this show, I mentioned it was full of
good one
legends. It is. I mean, everybody on here really shines, and most of them did make their name on Taxi. They were doing theater work or smaller roles in film and television, and this was like the role that led them to the limelight. Judd Hirsch kind of takes the lead role, but he's also the straight man in the show. He plays Alex. He is resigned to his fate as a cab driver. He kind of understands, like, look, I'm divorced. I'm in my mid-30s. Things suck.
He seems a little bitter.
He is bitter, and I think he's one of those guys, let me know if this sounds familiar to you guys, who maybe when they were younger really felt like even though they'd struggled, there was a lot of potential in there. And then you get older and you're like, what happened?
And you realize there's nothing that's ever going to change, ever.
So might as well just be a cab driver.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, I technically do drive things occasionally. So.
You are a cabbie for objects.
Do you think you could ever do like the Uber thing though with like people in your car?
I've thought about it, and I don't want to deal with people like that. So I have no interest in it. And I don't think they make any more than the stuff that I've done through Amazon.
I think it would
Walmart.
be so much stress for an introvert.
Well, you guys did what was it called?
There's a local company called Safe Rides. I don't know if it still exists, but the idea is that you can get the people home safely and their car back so they don't have to deal with it the next day. and you work in teams. And Spencer and I did this for a little while, and it was very difficult.
Did you guys get paid reasonably?
One or two times.
Oh.
You never really knew. It was so tip dependent or distance dependent because of mileage.
Was it through an app since it was a local thing?
Yeah, there was like a credit card app. Just some guy owns it.
Good for him.
Yeah, good for that guy.
I don't know if it still exists or not. I guess we could look it up.
I don't either.
Who cares?
Yeah, well, you know what? We're investigating all angles of our personal lives as we talk about Taxi. It makes sense.
That's what it makes you do.
It really gets you thinking about yourself and the people you know. But the other thing Alex does that Judd Hirsch gets to do is he's sort of the moral center of the show most of the time. If something is happening to one of the other employees, he will stick up for them no matter who they are.
And we really see that on display in the second episode we'll cover, his morality.
We do. Danny DeVito is the show's villain. He is the Sunshine Cab Company's dispatcher and the main boss. He has a boss above him, but we don't really see that guy, I don't think. He is a great character. He is an unrepentant asshole who just almost never presents his humanity, so when he does, it counts. And that's something I think that when we covered The Office, we talked about how the David Brent character that Ricky Gervais played in the British version is more like that than the Michael Scott version. I think it was pretty brave to go that route in the 70s. And you would need someone of this caliber to do the role so you still like him even though he's never likable.
Because he's charming and you're not threatened by Danny DeVito because he is so little, so that helps to the role as well.
By now, DeVito wasn't a star or anything, which he would be in the 80s, like a total star, lead in movies and stuff, having babies with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, being twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Or that's what it was.
No, he did a baby too.
He did both?
Junior?
Who would have a baby with their twin brother? I assume they're sequels. But Danny DeVito had already been in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest at this point.
Oh, okay.
As had Christopher Lloyd, who joins the cast full-time in this episode. This is what establishes him. He'd been in the show one episode prior in season 1, and Christopher Lloyd plays Jim Ignatowski, who's a very good-natured, drug-addled hippie who shows secret musical gifts throughout the series. He's a very good piano player and singer, which Christopher Lloyd apparently is.
I could see it.
Makes sense.
That dude seems multi-talented.
We had a little duet in this episode.
And I was very surprised how well everyone did. This was performed live.
No, that sounded great, honestly.
Tony Danza is in the show. He's named Tony, like he always is in every show he's in.
That's all he knows to answer to.
He plays a lunk-headed, terrible boxer, which I don't know if you guys know this about Tony Danza, but he's a lunk-headed former boxer.
I assumed. I mean, that just suits him to a T.
I didn't know he was a boxer in real life.
Do either of you like Tony Danza at
No,
all?
I don't think anyone did.
I don't understand the charm or the appeal. I've never seen a role where I said, this is good. And this is not one of them
The best
either.
I can say about him is sometimes I look at his face and I think about Macho Man Randy Savage for some reason.
To be fair, you do that with 80% of the people you look at.
Yeah, I just think, what if instead of whoever this is, I was talking to the Macho Man? Oh, yeah, from beyond the grave.
Give me my keys.
You would think that would be a pretty big stretch for most people in general.
I don't know anyone who looks like Randy Savage.
or acts like him.
No, but for some reason, I do think Tony Danza does a little bit.
Do you think he could pull off advertising for Slim Jims? Like, would that be a thing? You'd
No.
be like, yeah, I'll get one.
Because say what you want about Randy Savage as an actor.
He was in Spider-Man 2.
I do think he has a little bit more obvious charisma than Tony Danza as a performer. Tony Danza seems so sleepy.
There's just nothing there. That's why I'm just not.
Is he supposed to be like the eye candy, maybe?
I think so. And he also,
I think Jeff Conaway's the eye candy.
Also, Tony Danza is supposed to be a total idiot in this show.
Well, okay, that fits.
Which in Who's the Boss, he's not really as much, although he kind of is. Yeah, he's a himbo.
I like that term, himbo. I'm a fan of that one.
Yeah, like
Good
all
job,
of us,
kids.
right?
I don't think we're himbos.
You can't see us. They might think that.
Sure. Do you guys know that in the Macho Man Randy Savage rap album that he released, there's a song where he's critiquing Hulk Hogan for his acting abilities, and he says something like, Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hogan, your show is canceled. I got a prime role on Spider-Man 2. But then his role in Spider-Man 2 was like 3 minutes of screen time.
But you're in Spider-Man 2 versus a reality show.
Well, I think he was talking about Trapped in Paradise.
Or it could be Suburban Commando.
Or Suburban Commando or any of the other movies. Was Suburban Commando the one where the Undertaker's the bad guy?
I don't think so.
I
I
haven't
want to see
seen
that
it.
one, whatever it is.
Because I did see that.
What about Mr. Mom? I think he might be in that. Doesn't it sound fun, though, having Hulk Hogan as your mom? Oh, wait. No, it doesn't.
No, I'd be a lot more racist if
It
he
would be the
brought
worst
me up.
thing ever. You'd have money, brother. But
True. I would have less good hair genetics.
That's true, but
That's
you
the
wouldn't.
problem.
You wouldn't if you were Jeff Conaway's kid, because he's got a bunch of hair.
And it stays to the very end with Jeff Conaway. His hair was great through his career. I recognized him instantly because he was on Babylon 5.
Yep. I was going to say he plays Zach Allen on Babylon 5, whoever that is.
It's like a security guy.
He's also in a couple Matlocks. In this show, Taxi, he plays Bobby Wheeler, who is a struggling actor and who Louie hates because he's tall and handsome. And that comes up constantly. Like, there'll just be a conversation going on. I don't think we get any of this, but a conversation going on between other people, and Louie will attack Bobby in the conversation who is not part of it. Marilu Henner plays Elaine Nardo, who is the lone woman of the main cast at this point in the show. And she really is supposed to be the audience surrogate as much as anyone also. It's like a sane person struggling with real life issues. She is divorced. She's got kids. She doesn't know what to do, but she's an artist, and she also works in art museums and is really into that world, but can't get a foothold because she's poor.
What was her last name? Nardo, because they call her that a few times.
Danny DeVito calls her Nardo like only, despite perving all over her constantly.
But I didn't know what the last name was, and I just keep hearing Nardo, and I thought it was some like kind of 1970s insult, like you're a nerd.
It does
you're a
sound
Nardo.
like that one.
Quit being a Nardo, bro.
I didn't even think of that because I knew the show, but that does sound like that. Another major star who was really an attraction for people to the show was Andy Kaufman, the comedian and performance artist and real weirdo and probably bad guy who plays Latka Gravis, who is an immigrant, presumably from the Balkan Islands.
It's somewhere Eastern
That's
European.
what's hinted at in one episode or something. But they never say, so that he can essentially make up his own language and never have to be accountable for it.
Well, let's do this here. What do you guys think of the Latka character? Question 1. Question 2, what do you think of Andy Kaufman?
I wanted to bring this up too, because, I mean, in the 70s, he was a big deal in alt comedy, like a huge deal, to the point where he wouldn't really play a normal character. One of the reasons why he was given this one is because they wanted him on the show because of his talent.
Supposedly the casting director or something saw him do his bit about
On SNL.
Foreign Man was the character's name, and they thought, well, let's just do this. This could be great.
Yeah, because he was already on SNL by now, doing that character. And after seeing that, the producers get him on this show, and eventually they had to give him some sort of multiple personality disorder as a character so that he could be different guys as Latka. Now, while it is stupid, much like a lot of sitcoms like Seinfeld did, the show got a lot more absurd toward the end, and it kind of worked occasionally. I wish I knew the name because it's a really dumb name, but one of Latka's characters he becomes is an American chauvinist guy, and he just wears sunglasses and like a leather jacket over his coveralls.
Okay, that's good, because I just pictured him still in the coveralls.
And that's a trademark too. And we'll see it in this episode, when Latka dresses up, he still has the coveralls usually. So yeah, that's the cast. It's a really great cast.
Let's not answer my question at all.
What was your question?
What do you think of the Latka character?
Oh, sorry.
And Andy Kaufman.
Well, this won't surprise you, but I talked so much that I got past it and forgot. Me personally, I'm pretty lukewarm on the whole Andy Kaufman thing. A lot of it depended on what I think a lot of this sort of performance art does outside of the show, where he would make people uncomfortable who didn't want to be. And as far as the show goes, I get what they were trying to do, but I'm just never really a fan of the like guy that's not from an area trying to be from an area. Although I will say this, if you're going to do it, this is so much less bad than anything of the era than you would think it would be, being from the 70s, because he's not wearing blackface or anything.
It's not offensive, I think would be
but it's not
super offensive.
It's just not something about it though. There's so many things about this show I like, and this is not really one that stands out as something I like.
I'm not a fan. The character just, I don't know, when he does his, hey, say your thing in the foreign language, and he goes, it's complete gibberish.
Yes.
It's clearly gibberish. And I guess this is a comedy show. It doesn't need to try or whatever, but I find that just kind of sad. It's like I would much rather see someone learn a fake language or hire someone who's from a different country and have them do it.
Or just have him speak with an accent, because
Mhm.
the funny Latka parts are when Andy Kaufman gets the character right, because the character, at least in conception and right here, is a really sweet guy.
Sure, and that's a good trait to have.
When he gets that right, he's actually kind of, I think, a good actor. Like, it's kind of impressive, but we only see it a little bit.
Yeah, I think the character is perfectly fine because he is, in the episodes we see, he's well-intentioned. The comedy parts of it, though, no, it's pretty low effort, and it didn't really make me laugh at any point.
I don't understand Kaufman's success, to be honest. I don't get it.
The way I think of it is a lot like I think of like the Sex Pistols. Same time frame, too. Maybe it's not like actually very good, but it is very in your face, and people are very impressed by that.
And different.
And different.
Well, okay, so a little spoiler alert for next episode of the Boob Tube Boys when we cover our second Taxi episode. I will talk about some 1970s comedy and stand-up, and 1950s for that matter, and you'll really get a feel for what the normal bit of that would be.
Right.
And what Kaufman does is different from that.
It is.
I will give it that credit. I just think if Andy Kaufman were coming up now, he would be working in, doing jobs like Us and desperate to get his comedy out there because he wouldn't be successful at all.
I think coming at it after the fact, it's tough too, because we're so used to alternative comedy now.
Very true.
But I agree with you. I mean, obviously it didn't strike a chord with me in the way that, for instance, Danny DeVito did. I have always liked him, but I mean, this seeing him as this character as an adult, I just was very impressed.
And he's spry. So he's younger and, he's a little older and he's got whatever that disorder is.
In this episode, Danny DeVito is 33 years old.
Wow. That
just
is
to let
nuts.
you guys know. And 33 inches tall.
But yeah, no, like now when you watch him do stuff, it's kind of scrambles along and he just doesn't look like he's getting around.
Old.
Well, yeah. But including his stuff. But in this episode and the next episode, he's spry, he's bouncing around.
He gives a lot
on
to
cars. It's great.
But let's go ahead and talk about the episode. It's season 2, episode 3, Reverend Jim, A Space Odyssey. We start out with that theme song that we started the podcast with. On its own, I don't really like the song, but what we get here is this slow, sad elevator jazz from the late 70s as we watch a single cab go down the Queensboro Bridge tonight. And that really is the bridge that it is. Kevin James would be jealous. And there's something so solitary and lonely and sad about this intro. It's just cold. I don't know. I like it.
It's possibly the worst intro I think we've seen since Coach. And Coach is worse because at least this is a song.
This intro doesn't make you feel like you're dying slowly?
No, it makes me sad, but that doesn't mean it's good for a comedy show. Like I'm supposed to laugh, not be bummed.
There's the rub with Taxi. 1 minute, you're laughing. 1 minute, you're doing your taxes.
Oh, I think maybe at the beginning they get you in that state there so that it's easier to cheer you up. You want to be cheered up after that. So you're like,
okay.
I've been sad and now this is just what I need. I think it's a good mood setter.
On the other hand, it does put the pressure on you, though, to start the show out with a bang, because you run the risk of the person being like, did I just accidentally stumble into someone's home video or something?
That's why you have Danny DeVito. You just get a close-up on him and all is solved.
And let him go to town.
Him yelling in that microphone.
You know those candies where they have the life-size versions of him doing something really mean to a person and then they hug him afterwards? It's like first they're sour, then they're sweet.
Oh,
candies.
yes.
Well, that's what this is. It starts
It's
off
one big ad.
It's kind of sad. It makes you sad, and then it does something to make you laugh afterwards. And the laughter is all that much better when the sadness came first.
Van, to your point, this intro is about as stark as like the Waltons or something. Like watching the intro, what you think is going to happen next is you're going to get depressed. Much like the MASH theme, which did prevent me from ever watching MASH, which is why I'm always talking about after MASH, because I don't know what all that is.
Well, what about Walter? It's Walter with the asterisks in between each letter, like MASH. And it was a pilot featuring, what is it, Sonar? Is that his name or whatever?
Radar, I think.
Sonar.
Whatever. Anyway, he got his own
Sonar
show.
is actually the Bat character from MASH. You know what's weird about Sonar, the Bat character from MASH? He need a pound of mosquitoes a day.
And he could kill a lot of Vietnamese people.
Yeah. Wait, bats can do that? That's horrible.
Of course they can.
We need to get bats under control. It's just like the movie Bats tagline said. Bats, they're going to get you.
Bats, they're going to suck you dry. I believe it's the second half of
that was in the song, too, because there's a song, isn't there?
I think
Maybe this is just my memory.
I might have made that up.
You might have made that up. If we watched a movie when we were teenagers, there like 40% of it we have made up over time of like legend building.
Oh, yeah. And it'll never live up to the legend.
No, that's why it's best never to see bats again. One of the reasons. Once this episode finally starts, we're in Mario's, which is a bar where you can eat some food and there's red checkered tablecloths and it's the 70s and everybody's a little sweaty and they're wearing sport coats. And the whole gang from Taxi likes to eat here after or before their shift. Probably before, because they usually work overnights.
This is, as Spencer would say, this is their, boy, I thought I would get their place in Saved by the Bell.
The Max?
The Max.
What that
this is your The Max.
Let me give you another example for all of us who worked at a bowling alley till 3 a.m. in the morning. It's their Ben's Carriage House.
Fair enough.
They all work a shitty job and then they commiserate at this place and eat some food and have some beer.
It really does help, too, to have a place like that. I always feel a lot of union when I see characters do that in a show. It just gets relatable. It's something that you really need it to get by in life.
Makes them all believable when they're in the workplace too, because they do always hang out together. And they genuinely like each other even when they give each other shit, which in that East Coast way where you can say about anything and then if someone takes offense, you're like, wait, why are you mad?
I like the concept because for me and for probably most people, if you have that sort of experience at work, it's when you're younger, like it was for us. They're older and they still get to have that. That's like the only good thing about having a job. And that's not even a part of it as I get older. And I'm jealous they get that.
That's one of the things I like about this show so much is it presents this idea that if you're older and you did not enter a conventional path, like a career path, you don't have to feel alone and isolated. Like there are other people in that same position. I think in our the age we're in now, where America is so slick and so careerist, that feels more rare to me. You don't find like-minded people in the same positions as often.
I think that's probably true.
So the Taxi group, they're hanging around Mario's, and they're all in a good mood because Tony actually won a fight, which he does not ever do. Alex offers to buy everybody a beer. Well, just the people in their group, after the whole restaurant tries to take him up on it. Even the manager of this place, Tommy, not Mario. The restaurant's called Mario's, but the manager is Tommy.
And this is confusing, guys.
Yeah.
You know that thing in movies and TV that we just watched, which is like, hey, everybody, next round on me. I feel like if you're in the 70s or before or after for a little bit, maybe $50 and you could buy everybody a beer or something. If you do that now,
oh God,
it's like $1,500, right? For 30 people to get drinks.
That's one of those things, if you uttered it out loud, it's like saying Candyman in front of a mirror. It'd be so disastrous if you did it now.
But what's the procedure on things like that? I've always wondered this.
I have too.
So does everyone go up to the bar then and say, hey, I want my free drink that guy's paying for?
Yeah,
you have to go to him first.
Put it on the Judd Hirsch tab. Did you say that in this case?
I think so, because in Dumb and Dumber, remember, there's that mean Seabass guy, I think his name is.
Yeah.
And that's the joke they play on him, is they tell him they're going to buy him a beer, but then they go up to the cashier lady and they say, hey, this one's on that guy over there. And Seabass thinks like, oh, they're pointing at me because they're buying me a drink. And he volunteers and they put him down like, yeah, let's put you on Seabass's tab.
It is a real Seabass situation. I wish we had a bartender we could talk to about this because, like, I also think it could be good if you're one of them. You might be like, oh, I'm getting a big old tip.
I don't know, because I feel like if I bought everybody drinks.
You're in a real good mood if you're doing that, though.
But then you're like, oh my God, this bill's $1,500. I can't afford to tip, so then they don't.
But it's Judd Hirsch, and he's going to take care of you.
Actually, I did just hear Judd Hirsch's name brought up. I was listening to an episode.
Were you talking to Bob Newhart?
Of WTF, the Mark Maron show.
Was he on there?
Which I don't really listen to that often. No, Paul Scheer was on there, and I like Paul Scheer.
I do too.
So I listened to it, and it was whatever.
He has a book out, I think.
Yeah, and he was doing the press tour for that, and it's a bit of a bummer book, apparently. But also, I have a lot in common with Paul Scheer. Never mind.
Yeah, gap teeth.
But at the end of it, Mark Maron and him were talking about acting, and Maron said something like, yeah, when I act, I just kind of be me. I'm not really an actor. And then what am I going to do? Go for different roles or something rather? And jokingly, because he's Jewish, he said, the casting directors are going to come up to me and go, hey, can you Jew it up more? And he goes, Judd Hirsch, I'll play all his roles from here on out.
Mark Maron is a Judd Hirsch type
really
actor, too.
Just a bummer.
But you kind of like him?
Yeah, he's a little charming.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
If they did a remake in today of Taxi, you could put Mark Maron in it. I would accept that.
Man, that sounds fun, actually.
Christopher Lloyd would just play Christopher Lloyd's character.
I'm still around. Tommy, though, this manager guy, he even says the first picture's on him. Well, but more details come out that might prevent that.
Oh boy, did that guy go down hard. That sucker hit the canvas like a sack of cement.
You know, I'll tell you, I was worried for a minute. You never want to see anybody get hurt, you know.
Aw. Hey, you really gave it to him good, huh, Tony?
That was a weird thing, Tommy. The guy was climbing into the ring. He trips, falls down, knocks himself cold.
Tony won by default.
Well, you mean that's what you're celebrating?
I had to make it through the same ropes.
I actually do like that line read from Tony Danza. It feels very indignant, like, I did have to do the same thing.
And for Tony Danza, that is a thing.
That's
like getting through the ropes might be difficult for him.
Just looking at him and figuring out the geometry of it. Tommy rescinds the free pitcher at this point, and Christopher Lloyd walks in as Reverend Jim. He's covered in denim, head to toe.
And he looks already like a total lunatic.
Very frazzled.
His eyes are wild. He's kind of just stammering about. And I mean, I bet from birth, Christopher Lloyd looked like a lunatic. Yeah. Like he's always looked wild and rat shit crazy. And right out of the gate, I'm like, okay, I'm going to like him in this role. And I did.
Yeah, he's very good in it. And this is the role that basically made him famous. He has that character actor quality of like, you see him once, you will remember him forever.
Oh, when you were lying about the denim, he's wearing a t-shirt covered by like a long sleeve denim shirt, covered by a long sleeve denim jacket.
Denim eyebrows, denim hair.
Denim pants, denim feet.
Denim butt.
Denim dog. That's a superhero.
There's probably a 70s band called that too that plays like 60s type hippie music too late.
Or just covers of other 70s rock songs like Edgar Winter's group songs.
Oh, that exactly. Yeah, that sounds like he could have called himself Denim Dog. Jim in the first season appeared to perform a marriage between Lotka and a sex worker so that Lotka could stay in the country. That was his only appearance in season 1. He doesn't remember this at all, though, because Bobby's trying to call him over and have him hang out with everybody and explain this to him. The thing is, this character, Reverend Jim, he's not really going to remember much of anything. During all of this, Lotka also shows up wearing a sport coat over his coveralls, that thing I mentioned before that I really love, and explains that he's late because he got lost in Harlem trying to figure out a way to get to Tony's match. Presumably, he wound up in a bar talking to a bunch of Harlem neighborhood people and learning some new slang in the process.
And I really thought the whole Lotka talk to colored people plot was going to be bad. It's not.
It's not. I was shocked. It's stupid, but it's not
mean-spirited.
You can tell the intent was fine.
Yeah, and just the slang they use is okay, and it was all right. I was really concerned this was going to be horrible.
Yes, it's not a racist joke so much as it's a grandma rapping joke. You know what I mean? Like it's a fish out of water, but in an obvious way. I don't know how obvious it was then, but this was also a time when saying Harlem was really popular. Just say it in your show or your movie.
We did watch that movie, The Guy from Harlem.
Yeah.
But also it didn't take place in Harlem. He was merely the guy from Harlem.
He was from there.
But he was in Florida, I think.
He likes his steak well done.
And he likes really bad scotch. What a movie.
He likes all the worst things.
He likes women who wear full bed sheets as nightgowns.
I forgot about that.
Didn't he show up at like a friend's house and kick her out so he could bring in the like African delegate's wife that he was watching?
That sounds right.
That movie was wild.
Yeah,
I don't remember because I think we watched that the same night we watched Road to Revenge.
We did, and that's why I don't remember it as well.
Sorry, Champagne and Bullets. Or Get Even.
Yeah, any of those. You can call. I don't remember which edition we watched off YouTube. After Lotka gets all his stuff in, says his little lines, Jim comes back up to the table, and this is where they remind him of performing that wedding, which Jim thought was a dream. And we find out that Jim did actually have a little peaceful congregation during the Vietnam War, but they left him when the war ended, and Jim's just alone and aimless now. He's done really nothing but perform one wedding nude on the beach. Jim, sadly, or they think he's sad, goes back up to the bar, and Bobby really feels bad and says, "Can we just have him sit with us?" Once Jim sits down, Elaine peppers him with a bunch of really personal questions that I personally would find insulting.
I didn't like, both the way Elaine acts and the way Alex acts either. He almost acts like he's disgusted by everything Christopher Lloyd is saying. Now, it may be true because Lloyd is saying some drug-heavy hippie stuff. And of course, back then, hippies were loathed. So I don't know if that's a true character reaction, but watching this and not knowing a whole lot about any of the characters, I immediately thought Alex was like a mean guy.
I was actually really surprised knowing the character that he came across this way to start this episode. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also really a sign of changing values.
Sure.
In that, 40 years later, 50 years later, when we think of like jobs, we don't think of them the same way because they aren't the same thing anymore. But I think Elaine and Alex are essentially like, man, don't you want to make more of yourself? And they're thinking of it from the perspective of they're divorced and have alimony or whatever. And they're like, how are you scraping by? It doesn't have to be this bad for you. But it comes across, again, I'd walk out of the place if they said this stuff to me.
Yeah, just like, why are you being such assholes? Let me do my drugs in peace.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't terribly related, but Judd Hirsch in this scene has on the comfiest looking sweater. It's so thick and it looks like you could sleep on it.
He probably does.
It's a real 70s sweater.
Curls up in his little cab, has a nap.
Jim doesn't take any of this the way I would. He takes it all fine and answers honestly because Jim's a good guy. He's very chill, man, and you would be if you're on all of what Jim is. He even tries to pay for a round, but he only has yarn in his pants.
And a lot.
And just like half a spool of it. Elaine, again, reminds Jim, like, look, there's something more to life. You must want more. And Jim
says, must do a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Go to bed unhappy.
Or whatever they do, like the reverse 9 to 5.
Yeah, the other 9 to 5.
And Jim says, no, I'm fine. I'm just trying to be a living embodiment of the 60s. No big deal. I just been going with the flow. And then he asks Elaine a question to turn the tables about his substance use.
I get some drugs. Oh, not nearly so many as you probably think I did. How many drugs do you think I did?
A lot.
Wow, right on the nose.
Pretty great.
I like this.
And the look on his face, too. He looked like someone who heard someone answer something correctly.
Beautiful timing. Like, the comedic timing is so good for most of the actors in this.
He then quickly adds that he spent an entire year making a couch.
Macrame.
Yeah, to be specific. And he was also at Woodstock. And he makes an anti-disco joke, which is, again, such a staple of the late 70s. You're going to mention Harlem and disco, especially in New York. Jim also mentions protesting the quote-unquote crummy war, which Tony takes offense to because he's a Vietnam vet. And when Tony says, look, man, I made it possible for you to stay home and be stoned, Jim just says, thank you. And it diffuses the whole thing. And Tony just says, oh, you're welcome. Now, I know for a fact James L. Brooks was quite anti-war, so his sentiment would not be to side with Tony.
Sure.
But this scene is pretty great in terms of this little exchange because it shows how little this actually matters when it comes to just these two guys.
It's just passing it off and like it doesn't really get heated. It's funny. It's handled it quite deftly, I think.
Yeah, Jim can in the same breath be like, that war sucks, and be like, oh, well, thanks, though, because he knows Tony's trying to do what he thinks he's supposed to do or whatever.
Now, I don't believe for 1 second Tony Danza could go over to fight in Vietnam and not be immediately killed by like an enemy combatant or swallowing a landmine. I just don't believe that he went to Vietnam.
Especially because, like, knowing he's a bad boxer. How's he supposed to punch out a kid?
Yeah.
I want to see like an actual Tony Danza boxing match. We should see if we can find it somehow just to get an idea of what he actually looked like.
Yeah, I wonder if he was a level where he was on TV doing it or anything. Jim adds, look, I thought I was finding personal nirvana, but I was only actually getting recurring nightmares of the original Mouseketeers hatching out of sea pods.
That is terrifying.
Which this is a joke that seems like a very 90s joke, like when jokes started becoming absurd in that way and involving cultural stuff. I was like, what? Who wrote that? Or did he just say that? By now, everybody at the table's weirded out and just wants to go to home or work or wherever all these cabbies are going. Except for Bobby and Elaine, who still really want to find a way to help Jim, and it's Elaine who ultimately suggests getting him a job. Alex doesn't know how they would get a job for Jim until they collectively realize there is a totally skillless position, their own. Cue us going to the Sunshine Cab Company the next morning or night, or it's really hard to tell the time. And I actually kind of like that about this show, in that you always kind of feel like you're out of sleep and you don't know what time it is. Like the cabbies must.
I think that there is a certain skill set you'd have to be a good cab driver. And I don't think I would be good at it at all. Like I can't navigate traffic on the fly and go against like what the traditional route would be if you think traffic's going to change a different way.
While still being personable, but not getting taken advantage of.
Yeah, you got to be personable. You got to have like a good demeanor while you're navigating driving's stressful for me. So I just, in fact, recently we were talking about it. Like, man, you were saying your road rage is getting worse as you age.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you would make a very good cab driver either.
No. Also, keep in mind, this
Too
is the
tall
70s.
also.
Well, yeah, that is a problem. The seats don't always go back far enough. this is the 70s. There are no apps. It's maps and memory.
You have to really know a lot about New York. That'd be tough. So yeah, I think they're being a little bit harsh about how anyone can be a cab driver.
I think it would seriously be really hard. Obviously, though, much like so much of this show, the joke being they're all very self-deprecating.
Yeah, I would make the exact same joke in that career.
As the group gathers around they have this terrible, awful wooden picnic table that's indoors at this garage that's the cab company. It's like always falling apart. They play cards on it. They sit around and talk. This is another thing I just feel such nostalgia for watching this show and thinking of these characters sitting around having their little conversations about their lives in their mid-30s.
I should not be doing this because this is a comedy sitcom, but what are they doing? Are they on the clock? Is this before the shift? This doesn't make sense that they would all be here.
In
and being
here,
paid.
we find out this is before the shift because Louie's about to start their shifts.
Yeah, so you kind of gather and get your assignments in this room, sort of, is what it seems like.
And you'll have breaks and like off hours or something where you return to the garage. The cabs have to be worked on. You switch them out, things like that.
But what I don't like now is, and certainly would never tolerate if I got a new job, was you got to be here 15 minutes early. You're not going to get paid.
Yeah, yuck.
Then we're going to give you, it's like, no. If I'm here doing anything for you, you're paying me. And I think this is a situation where they're not getting paid while they're waiting. And again, this is a comedy sitcom. Who cares? But I don't care for that. Not one bit.
That's an attitude I definitely have too, to the point of where I've been very annoying to employers because I just refuse to do anything for free. This is also our first look at the Sunshine Cab Company, which is also really gross. I love the scene setting. This is stuff that I don't think sitcoms do as much now, like really try to make the place lived in. Next episode, we see people, I'll get into it then, but we see some clothing choices that are very intentionally shitty. I just love how scuffed up the show feels.
You don't think like the Big Bang Theory has any rooms like this that make you feel like it's real and that you could actually go there and...
You know, we're going to have to cover it and find out.
I just think it's soulless, probably.
I bet it is, yeah.
Because they sit down and they say their joke. No one would laugh, except then they have the laugh track.
Yes.
So that way the old person at home who's retired and watches this in woodworking shows goes, oh, this is the funny joke about nerds. And then the audience laughs, so I know to laugh.
Lifeless, that's the perfect word, Van, because like when I've watched specifically a couple of these older sitcoms, the Taxi and Mary Tyler Moore Show, and obviously the same people are behind them, I've been really struck by the life in them and how the performances really, everyone feels committed and they're not just rehashing lines and sitting and waiting for laughter. They play off the laughter. Bobby and Jim arrive. Jim apparently drove Bobby in so Bobby could get a look at what kind of driver Jim is, and apparently he's fine. He did a good job. Everyone is curious about one thing, though. How are we supposed to get Jim hired? Because Louie has to be the one that hires him. And we haven't met Louie yet. Louie, of course, is Danny DeVito. We met Louie now. He's up in his power tower calling everybody a loser and handing out driver envelopes to start the shift to put their cash in. The cage is raised up several feet off the ground, and it's covered in chain link fence all the way around. And he's in there with Jeff. Jeff, I think, puts envelopes in cubbies and takes phone calls and kind of agrees with Louie.
That's, I guess, it. It doesn't seem like there's anything else he does or gets any lines for anything.
And Jeff, I will say, he becomes a much bigger part of the show. Not a big part later on. A lot of the minor characters do as people get reconfigured.
I think that I would like that job because he just kind of is helping out, doesn't really have to do anything.
No pressure.
And then just gets to hang out with Danny DeVito.
Assistant to the asshole, that position.
You have to count money when people have cab driving contests, but that's about it.
Think how much better you seem personality-wise just because you're not that guy.
Yeah.
Like just
That's true.
by comparison, you can be like, at least I'm not him.
Everybody's trying to figure out this Louie thing, the best strategy to deal with him. Jim doesn't really take part in that conversation so much as he slips drugs into Louie's coffee.
It's such blatant, just cavalier. So I'm going to drug him.
Just waltzes right up and drops it in. I did not expect this.
Yeah, and everyone is shocked. So immediately, I was thinking before anything could happen, what are they going to do? Like, surely in a sitcom, a lot of times something like this that's serious happens and everyone just doesn't say anything. That's not the case here. Alex runs up to Louie to get him not to drink his coffee, but Louie is a dick. So he's like, I'm going to drink this no matter what you say, and slurps his coffee down more aggressively than he would have anyway, thus ingesting something that's about to change his mood quite severely.
There are a lot of bosses over the years that I would love to have given tranquilizers to.
They would have all been better to deal with. Any boss, even the good ones.
The problem is, if I had tranquilizers, I would take them myself.
I would give them to me.
Mhm.
I would be the one falling asleep on cabs, even if I didn't work at a cab place.
One time when I worked at Expedia, which I hated every absolute second of it, it was mind-numbingly awful, and I was so depressed, even though it's the only time in my life I ever made like really good money. I was prescribed Ativan, which is like kind of Xanax, except a little more long-term. I took one at work. It was my break, 15-minute break. So I went downstairs. We worked in this old airport, and I fell asleep for like 2 hours, and nobody came to get me. Anyway, I come back, and I clock back on and never told anybody, and nobody said anything. So it was fine.
So it was a win, really.
Yeah.
Although at the time, I'm sure you were like, uh-oh.
I mean, most of my money was made via sales as opposed to actual hours on the phone or whatever.
Something
so it
I'm
didn't
sure,
really hurt me.
Listeners would think just hearing you would love to do.
Yeah, I love sales. No, fuck that. It's so awful. God, I hated it.
What a nightmare that would be. You would need all of the drugs that Jim here has to get through that.
I was so relieved when they fired me. Oh, it genuinely was a relief.
Jobs like that, when you're younger, you don't realize, if that's not your personality and you force yourself, you don't realize what you're doing to your mental health.
Yeah,
at
true
that age.
damage.
It seriously, I'm scarred from my call center job from 15 years ago.
I am too. I struggle initially with phone, like doing any sort of phone call because of that still. It's bizarre.
I've always had the phone thing, but this made it worse. And that is a time in my life that I can genuinely say is a monument moment to changing me for the worse.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, because I did develop some bad habits and I had the mental just anguish from doing that job. And it's crazy to think about in hindsight.
Fucked your brain up.
Yeah. Wish I would have drove a cab instead.
You could be really well-mannered and adjusted like Louie. Louie, right as he's drinking the coffee, I really like what he's doing. He's on the phone with someone and calls them bone brain.
Which we know that's not one of the 5 bones.
No.
Brain is not a bone, Spencer. It's too squishy.
Then when he hangs up the phone, because he had to answer it, he goes, "Where was I?" to Jeff, and Jeff goes, "Giving him hell, Louie."
And Louie's so happy when he's like, "Oh, good, I can keep doing that."
Oh, I love that. So Louie starts handing out the cash envelopes to all the drivers and then falls asleep on his big, huge microphone like Michael Buffer has.
Oh, yeah.
When he
Let's get
announces
ready to
boxing.
rumble. Mhm.
Yeah. Then he rises immediately back to action, calmer and looser than he has ever been before. Pickles.
Hey, come on, guys. Let's get cracking here. Let's get this show on the road. Vodka. My golly. Let's get this cab out, huh? Zoom, zoom.
The thing Louie does at the end where he does a trust fall onto the side of the cab and pushes himself back up all very happily, like a little kid might do. I don't know if he improvised that or someone told him to do that, but it was incredible.
You know, this bit, the whole Louie on drugs, didn't necessarily do it for me, but it sure did it for the studio audience. I think that's a product of something you kind of mentioned at the beginning. I haven't spent 28 episodes with these characters.
Yes, it totally is.
So this was the first time watching it, just kind of like, this is kind of funny or whatever. But boy, the audience loved it.
The other thing I'll add is I really think this is because I agree with you, actually. I think the Louie on drugs segments of our 2 episodes, kind of the weakest stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what I will say is his physical acting really outpaces the lines he's given, which is surprising to me. I think there's a lot more to do with this than they did, but he is given his all to the performance.
It is better than any given moment in television, movies, or whatever, any time in history where they try to present someone on weed.
Yes.
No one has ever gotten that right. They always just make it like Michelangelo. And then it's totally, we need pizza.
When they could just be like, what does Brian sound like on the podcast?
Yeah, I'm pretty high right now, to be honest.
As Louie's talking to Latka, you can really sense his true affection coming through for him, which is also really rare. I like that.
It's a little sweet.
Louie begins singing a song called Moonlight Bay, originally written in 1912, which is probably why it made me want to cry. Jim is harmonizing with it. This is what we talked about earlier, and you can tell Christopher Lloyd has kind of a nice voice. And he was a theater actor too, so makes sense. The rest of the cast sings along as Louie falls asleep on top of a cab after using a paint bucket to get up there. But before he falls asleep, Bobby does manage to get the question in. He asks if Louie will hire Jim, And Louie says yes before saying everybody works on Moonlight Bay, which is the funniest part of this. So good they used it as the capper.
And I've only seen 2 episodes of Taxi, obviously, to this point. Does Latka do anything ever? Because the only thing we ever see is him standing there polishing a wrench. And he's supposed to be a mechanic. Do we ever see him fake being under the car? Do the hoods ever go up?
No.
Or does he just stand there and polish a wrench and that's it?
I think the main Latka role is for him to just get little things in when they can, little character
little
moments.
snips, yeah, where he goes,
He does have some romantic storylines. He gets married later to Simca, who's played by Carol Kane, actually.
Carol Kane, who, of course, was the woman who we've talked about on the Boob Tube Boys. We saw her in the marine biologist episode of Seinfeld. She was the woman who was bonked in the head by the PDA that the Russian guy threw out the window. And funny other Seinfeld thing is in the next episode, we get the guy from the Chinese restaurant episode. He's the Asian maitre d' who shows up in the car.
We do.
So it happens a couple of times, and I didn't expect Seinfeld references in this show. Here we are.
Kind of makes sense. I would imagine there would be influence from some of these late 70s sitcoms on another New York sitcom 10 years later.
Andy Kaufman also played George. I forgot about that.
I would like to see that.
Thank you very much. I am Art Vendele.
So this thing where they drug Louie to get him to agree to a thing, it reminds me of a Simpsons episode. Do you remember the bowling one where Homer forms a bowling team at work?
Yeah, with a Pooh and Barney
and Mr. Burns, because to get Mr. Burns to agree to sponsor the team, it's right after he huffed his own ether rag. And then he hallucinated and saw Homer's popping fresh.
Kept poking him in the belly.
Yeah, and then he was like, sure, I'll give you the money you need because I'm high, and he doesn't really know
also,
what's
the
going
fact
on.
that it's an ether rag is perfect.
And he just pushes it right in his face. There's a little bit of that in the scene because that Louie is like
for sure.
whole other guy just because he's on drugs.
I'm sorry, sir. They seem to think of you as an ogre. Ooh, I should crush them and eat their bones.
Simpsons is a good show.
I've been watching it a couple episodes recently, so it's fresh on the mind.
You can always pick it up.
Anytime.
Even if it's been like 5 years, you can just put an episode on and you're like, oh, this is good.
Never ceases to delight.
Saw an episode I'd never seen before from like season 5.
Wow.
That blew my mind. It was a clip show episode. See, I remember several, like there were 2 that were hosted by Troy McClure, but then this one I'd never seen, and it was Marge and Homer telling like romantic stories to the kids. Do you remember this?
Sounds familiar, yeah.
Vaguely.
Then they showed the thing where Grandpa Simpson dates Marge's mom, and then they showed the thing where Homer almost cheats on Marge with the woman at the power plant, and the one where Marge almost cheats on Homer with the bowling instructor.
Oh yeah, Jacques.
But yes, it was a clip show, and it wasn't good, but I'd never seen it before.
I don't know if I've seen that. I would have seen anything from season 5 a lot because I had those DVDs.
Yeah, that was the one with the Homer head, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wasn't season 5 the
The first
controversial
one
one?
with
The one everyone hated.
Yeah, they couldn't stand it.
Can't stand ya.
I was pretty mad about it too. I didn't, it just only for shelf reasons.
Sure,
Exactly. Your collection.
Our next scene takes place at the DMV, which also looks gross. Jim is trying to get all the necessary, I don't know if they ever say, but the ID credentials, perhaps license to drive a cab or a car in general.
I took it as like he was doing like the whole driver's license thing. Like he didn't have any of that.
He may have, and he needs a lot of help, as it turns out. Thankfully, Elaine, Bobby, and Alex are trying to help while Tony is there too.
The best part of Tony being there is that Tony Danza cannot handle this scene. Every time Christopher Lloyd does something funny, Tony Danza has to turn away from the camera because he's laughing. He keeps breaking. And if you watch for it, it's hilarious because 99% of the time, you just see the back of his head and Tony Danza like shake
And
laughing.
he doesn't know how to do what the rest of the cast does, I think, very impressively, which is laugh when someone does something funny in a natural way that your character would.
Yeah, make it like a human.
Something people don't do in sitcoms now, which I think they take everything deadpan. Like someone says the funniest thing ever and you just stare at them like a fucking monster.
Yeah, letting the audience do the laughing for your characters, basically.
Yeah, and I think like this also makes you feel like the cast is more communal when they're laughing with each other. But Tony Danza, rather than like play the thing straight and just chuckle, he looks away, drawing attention to the fact that he's laughing. And then when he's not doing that, he looks irritated.
I remember on King of the Hill when Bobby has to call Connie and he uses his Tony Danza prepaid phone cards to do so. And then every 30 seconds, Tony Danza pipes in and says, hey, it's Tony Danza. you've got 3 minutes left on your card.
I remember that. I didn't even see that show, and I remember that.
I love how washed up Tony Danza jokes were already happening in the 90s.
This is obvious, but I was one of the few people who didn't watch King of the Hill. That was Mike Judge, right?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a great show.
Fun show.
Interesting. Mike Judge.
You both were, when we were younger, anti King of the Hill.
Wasn't anti. I
You
just never got into it. Yeah.
You're Brian in that regard, but also anti-Futurama. And both are phenomenal shows. And Futurama got bad lately.
I tried to watch some Futurama and it was fine. I just didn't stick with me.
It's so good for like 3 or 4 seasons. They're like Simpsons era good because the writers that were on The Simpsons during that period of time that it was so good left to do Futurama. So
yeah, David Cohen created it, I think.
David X.
Oh,
Cohen.
yeah. No, he's still Cohen. But King of the Hill, I had seen sporadically when I was younger. And I was in my early 20s when I watched it enough to get it. When I was younger, I watched it and there would be jokes I'd laugh at, but some of it I would not understand what they were doing with the serious storylines, which is also a parody, the saccharine music. But I would just be like, what are they trying to combine these things? Then it was probably 21 or 22. I bought, again, a DVD set, like the first few seasons at Walmart because it was on sale. And I just burned through them. And then I was like, oh, I totally get this.
I understand it now.
But credit to that show because it wasn't obvious to me when I was younger. Among the things Christopher Lloyd's Jim has to figure out and doesn't know are his name, eye color, and he says it, earth weight.
Well, because of space, you don't have a weight.
He says that.
I did actually laugh at it was real quiet and subtle, and it's not even at the forefront of the scene, but when he's filling out the eye part, Elaine, the way she scolds him is like, don't put 2. I love how she does that.
It is great because, when it says eyes, she says don't put 2 in that kind of exhausted way, but normally what you would have is just the character say 2. So it is good to have another character get the line.
And she nails the tone of it just right.
Or the low-hanging fruit joke that every show does, which is sex. Yes, please.
Oh, that's the worst.
Because they're horny, Brian.
They want to fuck.
We almost got to watch Christopher Lloyd have sex.
Which,
pretty hot.
Yeah. It'd be weird, I bet. It wouldn't be boring.
You think he does those eyes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think he's got a choice in that.
His O face.
Christopher Lloyd is also licking his pencil.
A lot.
Repeatedly before writing, and at one point you can tell he plays it like it hurts. But he keeps going back.
What is that? Why do people do that?
I don't know.
I don't understand, because there has to be a reason.
It has to have been a thing you used to have to do, like, it won't work right until you get started up with your spittle.
Until you slobber on your pencil.
But I have seen it before and I've never understood it. Bobby asks Jim a few more questions after taking over writing down answers. And they end up having to lie about a lot of them. Here's an example.
Mental illness or narcotic addiction?
Now, that's a tough choice.
Another thing very aided by Christopher Lloyd's wild-ass eyes.
What kind of a question is that on a questionnaire?
Yeah.
No one's going to write yes.
I bet you...
I am addicted to narcotics.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I definitely am. It's probably an insurance thing.
I guess.
They have to ask
you have to put it on there no matter what.
Yeah, even though no one's going to answer
when you're
correctly.
confronting them later and you're like, you said on this form you didn't have a mental illness, and you do.
And you are Christopher Lloyd.
Also, he says he's like 5'10". When they say height, Christopher Lloyd is 6'1". I looked it up.
Wow.
Yeah, he didn't look 5'10" to me when I saw that scene. I was like, he seems taller.
I've always thought of him as kind of tall. But he's also thin and always has been thin, and that makes you look taller. Elaine is actually optimistic that Jim might pass the test. Alex is worried no matter what happens, and I think that's fair. Jim's taking this test while seated in one of those little elementary school one-piece desk things.
Where it kind of curves around a little.
So already we have the visual of wild Christopher Lloyd, who's kind of tall, in this little child's desk. And he is taking the test and gets stuck on the question of what a yellow light means. And this is a sitcom trope. He whispers to Bobby asking for help, and Bobby says, slow down, and Jim takes it wrong, meaning that he should ask the question slower to Bobby. Normally, I hate this. This is repeated 4 times and actually did work for me.
Yeah, well, they kept going with it, and you have to admire it.
And again, this is Christopher Lloyd, who finds a way to get even slower and doesn't break while doing it. And thinking about this joke at the time, I'm like, I bet this hadn't been done 1,000 times yet either.
That's the saving grace for me, because it didn't work for me. I thought this was too much. I thought they did it 1 time too many or 3 times too few. either go way beyond to make it funny again or do it and I get a laugh. But I thought it was too much.
For me, the timing did work because I was expecting 3 because everything's always fucking 3. So when he did the 4th and they cut it, I also like that they cut it how they did.
I did like that they let him actually, because I thought they were going to fade the scene entirely.
They don't though, yeah.
They did let him actually finish it the 4th time. So it was like, okay, I didn't think it was funny, but I did respect that they stuck it out like they did.
That's basically what I mean too. I didn't actually laugh at it.
Sure. I mean, it reminded me so much, and I hate to do this twice in the same episode, but it reminded me so much of the Sideshow Bob with rakes thing in that one episode where he just keeps stepping on him over and over again. And the writers are going for the exact same thing there. It's like, yes, I know you don't think this is funny anymore. We're going to do it again anyway. And you're right. I doubt it was as done at that point in comedy in the 70s, whenever this was made. But it's something where they saw it through and it was like, all right, I understand what they did. And that was ballsy. Cool.
I'm enjoying seeing tropes enacted in some of these earlier shows with better actors because a lot of these, you'll see them in 90s shows that we watched as kids that suck or something that you're just watching, like Saved by the Bell or something. So you're like, oh, I've never actually seen this done well at all. What would it be like if it was done well?
And I think there's something to whatever something morphs into over the years and how bad it gets. It would still be interesting if you could find the origin of that or the origin of the trope. I'd still like to see that, even if I hate what it became.
Especially doing this podcast. Now I find myself very interested in when did that start? When did people start doing this in TV?
How did they ruin it? Because that's usually how it ends up.
Yeah, that's why you're asking the question to start with. The DMV part of the show's over and we're back at the Sunshine Cab Company. Everyone is shocked because Jim did pass his driver's test. Jim's proud he didn't hardly hit anything, and Alex hands him the keys to his first cab and his first envelope. And Jim gives a little speech, he's so touched, and Alex is touched too. And this is the kind of thing Alex says it's a little cheesy, but he has such a big heart. He's like, I want to be your first fare. And gets in the cab with Jim, and they do a little play acting of where to, even though he's not really Jim's first fare. He's not going to pay for that. Come on.
Uptown. That's where they funk you up.
I heard there was a girl there. Just one. Uptown girl.
What happens downtown, Spencer? Do you know?
Well, that's where you go when you need the lights to be a little brighter.
Yeah.
I hear everyone goes there.
What is that line? Downtown.
Everything's great when you're...
that's where the lights are at. Is that what the line?
Yeah, there's a bunch of
things.
That's
where the lights are at? That is a stupid line if that's
it's something like that.
It's not wrong, though.
There's a lot of rambling about how it'll make you happy when you're not, which I don't think that would work for me.
Spencer has performed this song live. He should
Only
know.
a bit of it, though. We cut it off smartly, I would add. We didn't do that entire
We
song.
actually weren't willing to play as a rock band 4 minutes of downtown in front of people. Only 2.
We just did the first couple verses.
So I guess here is where the lights aren't at.
Yeah, they're gone.
Oh, that's why it's so
we're
dark
not downtown.
in here. Okay.
Jim, he backs directly through the closed garage door and ruins a side of the cab company, and then we go to credits.
Everyone is really more amused about that than horrified.
I think I'd be a little more horrified.
Than the thousands of dollars of damage by your guy who just got licensed.
Yeah.
Who might do this to a pedestrian.
Will do this to a pedestrian. Although, I'm assuming that the cab driver job does stick throughout the series for Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah, it's like Seinfeld. This ended and some plot points continue, but a thing like this will happen and it's just
whatever.
Yeah, it didn't
That's
happen.
fine.
Assume a time gap happened.
Well, I thought it was interesting Christopher Lloyd isn't in our next episode. And it's sequentially in the same season, but 5 or so episodes later. He was in 96 of 114
He's
episodes.
in most.
So most of them, but we just happened to miss him.
He was probably off doing some play or something where he hangs upside down and screams. The credits for this show are just like the opening credits, only it's nighttime. Yeah.
It's a little better,
Yeah.
I think.
Good juxtaposition.
I could argue you should flip them because they work night shift.
Yeah, I can get along with that.
It's a night feeling show. You start with the nighttime, you end with the daytime, and give it that disorienting feel you would have getting off your shift.
I like that. They should have done it.
I like it too.
The credits end with this thing that it says a John Charles Walters production, and a woman tells this old 70s businessman named Mr. Walters good night, and he goes, "Rah." I've always remembered this.
I didn't finish the episodes when we watched them. I stopped when the credits started, so I missed it, but I'm disappointed
It's like this little production tag, and it really struck a chord at me. I was like, oh my God, I remember this.
You did something, though. You just said it ends with, and then just listed a bunch of first names.
Yeah. That's all one guy's
But that's
name.
one guy, Charles John Michael Johnson.
Just think of a white man's name.
Yeah.
Shove them together. It's this guy's name. And of course, he was successful. If you give a guy enough white guy names, he's going to succeed.
So is it like the bumper at is it Adult Swim or one of those?
Absolutely.
Yes. Is it
It's
like
just
that?
like that.
Okay. That's what I was picturing. I
Or
like
one of
that you
those.
knew immediately what I was trying to say when I started that.
And then there's Sit Ubu, Sit. I don't know. That's like Paramount.
I don't
or
know
something.
that one.
There are a lot of those things. The Office had that one that I, for some reason.
Oh, when you said it came back, but not all the way.
Or the J.J. Abrams one with the robot coming across the screen. He goes, bad robot.
Yeah.
Bunch of kids.
Man.
I want to make one of those for us.
We should.
Okay. A Bootu Inc. like stinger. I'm
But,
going to write it down.
but we're not bees or hornets. How would we have stingers?
It'd have to be a sheep, obviously. What does a sheep sound like?
Ah.
Bad.
But what would Bootu sound like?
He doesn't make noise. That's the
Is
thing.
he mute?
He's always
He's a mute sheep?
He was traumatized as a young sheep. That is it for this episode of Taxi. We're going to be back next week to talk about it some more. Before we leave, though, you should give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to them.
I'll get a tattoo of Christopher Lloyd's eyeballs.
That sounds really metal, actually.
On your eyeballs.
Yes.
Whoa. Or on your eyelids. So when you shut them, you look like you're awake and on drugs. You should also, if you feel so inclined, to check us out on YouTube. Van's been uploading the back catalog there. Also, patreon.com/Bootu Inc. We have a lot of bonus episodes there, and they're free.
All for free.
Yep, you can pay us, though, if you want to do it. But you don't have to, though, if you don't want to do it.
But if you don't want to do it, you should still pay us just for the sake of it.
Yeah, give us money is what we're saying.
You're rich.
Yeah.
You out there
We
listening?
tend to attract a really wealthy
Wait, guys,
clientele.
we have to stop now. Our ride's here. Taxi! Taxi!